daughter's dress is too small for the dress form. I need to get an even smaller dress form just to fit her. I couldn't get it over the shoulders, and I don't think I'm gonna be able to zip it up. Oh well, we'll have to live with it like that for now. Welcome back, sewists. I have a fun and pretty simple project for you today. I'm currently tracing out the pattern for it. The basic little slip dress, if you saw last week's haul, that's what we're working on. I'll put a little picture of it up here. If you want to buy the pattern, all that information will be below. So I'm going to finish tracing out and then I'll talk to you all about the project. Aw, man. I traced just crooked enough that I don't get my little corner on here. Frustrating. Oh well. Okay, friends, I have got my pattern traced off. I have my fabric chosen. Let me show you. So I'm not going to use all of this, but we have this very sweet dress over here that's semi-sheer because it's a Georgette, and we want to pump up the color a little bit. It's a very soft muted rose, which is lovely. It's for my daughter. Her complexion is similar to mine, and it's almost nude colored when it's on our body. So she picked this up on sale. It is sheer. It is also too small for my dress form because she is a very tall and thin gal. She looks good in everything. I bought every shade of pink in this jersey spandex knit. I showed it on last week's haul. It's from Pierce Fabrics. It will be linked below. And we did a FaceTime because she doesn't live near me. And I put all the colors under it so we could see how they looked. So here it is. This is the color we ended up choosing. It just makes it a little bit more pink. It pops a little bit. You can see all the seaming, etc., which we're fine with. So we're making the little slip to go under it. Now I did choose 6 shades of pink. So we have lots of options. I'm going to go ahead and show you. This one is I think called Dry Rose. It's number 1103. These I got on Etsy. They had, I tried counting, but over 80 shades in this great fabric. This would make great t-shirts. It would make great under things. It would make lightweight athletic wear because it has spandex in it. So this is, which is pretty close to the color of the actual garment. And it looks fine too, but it doesn't pop as much. You can see how much more muted it makes. So that's why we went with the light pink. It just pops the color a little better, but both would be fine. I have left, however, 1 yard of 60-inch wide of all these awesome fabrics. So you will be seeing this again. And that's why I was willing to go ahead and order one in each color, besides the fact that they were on sale. I got them for about $8 a yard. I think they're normally around $11. So I ordered them all up. But I love these colors. I definitely would wear them. My mom would wear them. I'm already thinking about some great little under camis and things, I have a great pattern that I want to try, and I think this will be the one. I have all these other shades though, because when you're ordering online, you're never sure. This one was also a contender. I think this one was called Wild Rose. And they all just looked more shadowy. It actually darkened the color. The only one that really brightened it up was that Ballet Bubblegum Pink. Now, you saw me in the beginning tracing my pattern off. I will have a whole video coming soon on my sewing room update, and that will be one of the things I will discuss with you. So the whole pattern the way I trace my pattern will be coming to a video near you soon. Let me move her out of the way. Wearing one of my favorite raglan tees. I have lots of raglan t-shirt pattern videos. This is my favorite tee, one that I traced off of an old t-shirt, but I do have the video about how I traced it all off, and another one on how I sewed it up, so I will have those linked below if you want to make this one. I have so many others, so if you put raglan in the search bar on my channel, there will be quite a few coming up, including one that I did just a few weeks ago that's super cute. So let me talk to you about our pattern. It is the most classic bias cut slip dress, very 1930s. But the thing I liked about this company, and I was going to do it anyway, I was just going to use a knit and cut it on the straight of grain instead of on the bias, but it actually says that on the pattern. Cut it on the bias if you're using a woven, on the straight of grain if you're using a knit. One of the things we really needed was a pattern that had lots of sizes, because my daughter is the other end of the fitting spectrum, and she has a hard time getting things to fit because she's so long and lean, but still curvy. So she can get something that might fit around, but it's boxy, or it's tight in the hip and big in the bust, or the waist is just almost always too big on her because she is very curvy and she has a very tiny waist. So one of the things I liked about this pattern is it's naturally sort of bodycon because of the shaping, and it starts at a 0-0, which is very close to her size. However, she's long. So a lot of times when you see a 0-0, they expect you to be 4 foot tall, not 5'7". So the nice thing is I can do the adjusting in this for her. So I did. I checked their measurements against her measurements, and they did a very nice job of saying body measurement and finished garment measurement, so I could compare everything to see that we got the wearing ease we wanted. Nice thing about a knit is you need less wearing ease, so it can be a little more bodycon. The other thing, and I will show you this, the pattern has very interesting shaping. I thought I actually traced it wrong, but no, that is the shape of the pattern, so let me show you. All right, so here's my pattern front. Going to be cut on the fold. You can see where the strap is going to go. Comes down, it dips in just a tiny bit at the side, has a nice little shaped hip, and then it sort of dips in again before swinging out for the hemline. And the nice thing about that is it's much more fitted up to the hip line, and then it swings free at the hem. And of course, we're going to shorten this. This one's much too long the way we have it cut. It also has included both grain lines, our bias and our woven, or our straight of grain, cut on the fold for both pieces. And then we have a strap and 2 little facings. Now you could totally bias trim this whole thing, which I may do. Instead of doing the facing, I may roll my strap and make it all continuous. The biggest concern with that is that you have to know your fit exactly. So I've got to double check that I know my fit well, but we may sew it that way because I like the way that looks. And then here's my nice fabric. So fun. Okay, so we are all ready to start cutting out. So we may be all ready to cut out as far as the video, but I personally am not. I have things I have to do, so I have to actually stop sewing here today, and I will pick up again tomorrow with the cutting out and the sewing. So I will see you. So I'm laid out and ready to go. It's ready to cut. I only have 1 yard of my fabric because I was thinking this is a straight slip dress. I make slips out of 1 yard all the time. However, this one does have a slight A-line skirt on it, or hemline. So I have narrowed that to make it fit. It also has a big, deep facings and straps. I don't have room on my fabric for those things. Now I was considering doing an all-in-one strap, and I think I do have enough fabric for that. So I'm going to just cut strips for the strap that's going to go all the way around the neckline and the armhole to finish it off instead of doing the deep facings. Both could work. If I had enough fold-over elastic, that would have been my personal choice. but I don't have enough. I'm not going to mess with it. This has to go in the mail tomorrow morning. This is Sunday. So we're going to work with what we've got. I'm ready to cut out and we'll be over to sew on. It's going to take me minutes. I've got to trace off my little strappy parts for the whatever, but it should go pretty quick. Hopefully you can see I have tiny yellow lines. The strap is 1.5 inches wide. So I have traced that on here twice as long as I can get it. And this will work for the neckline. I hope, fingers crossed. Okay, super easy cutting out. I have my front and my back cut, and then I cut strips of my stretch knit in 1.5 inch widths, and as long as I could get it, so that I can use it to make the strapping. So I have a bunch of pieces of this, so I'm deviating from the pattern. However, I want to also make this in the satin on the bias. So stay tuned because I think we're going to do that one too. I went through my stash. I have some satin that I think is wide enough, and it's also a good color for my daughter. So I'm going to make this exact same size pattern in 2 different ways. One in the knit, which is what we're doing right now, and then I'm going to come back and do it again in the satin in a navy, and we'll do it exactly by the pattern for that one, other than I'm going to make it short because she doesn't want the long length. And we'll sew it up one more time, and you can see how it looks, the difference in how it lays, and also 2 different ways to put it together. So watch till the end to see version number 2. Here is my pink knit, and I have just clipped it together on the side seams. This has 1/2 inch side seams. I'm thinking about when I do the satin, I'm just going to serge it together here, but on the satin, I may do a self-enclosed seam. I haven't decided for sure yet, but I'm considering it. So it's so fast and easy to just serge it together. That's the thing that when you're in a time crunch like I am, makes me kind of like, I don't know. But I'm just going to serge together both side seams. Then I'm going to switch my machine over to the cover stitch because I'm going to cover stitch the hem and the straps. 1/2 inch seam allowance, we're just doing front to back, right sides together, side seams. I need to take my glasses off to see the camera screen and put them on to see my sewing. So here is one nice and stretchy, sweet little side seam. I am going to give this a press. It has some wrinkles in it. Now we're going to come around and do the other side. Right. We have a slip. You can see how quick this sews together. So that's it. All side seams done. I'm going to now switch my machine over to a cover stitch. I have a whole video on that, so I'm not going to show you all the things because there's a lot of switching out. The video is the first time I tried switching it over, so it's not like I do it smoothly and perfectly, but it goes pretty quick. So if you're interested in just what the cover stitch, the mechanism to getting over to a cover stitch on the Bernina L890, I'll put that video down below for you if you're curious. So I'll be back in a minute after I get my machine all switched over. Okay, I have the hem in and ready to go. Now, this could be treated like a slip, and you could easily do lace along the hem, but I just wanted a nice, basic, simple little hem to go under things. And now we're going to start working on the little strap area, and then we're done. And how I'm going to do the straps, and then we can see how it looks under the dress and start on our navy one. This actually goes pretty fast. The way I'm sewing this one, because I'm doing the straps the way I am, is taking longer than if you do it with the facings. The facings is a much faster way of sewing. So you get 2 options here, but it goes together very quickly. I'm going to start trimming this off. All right, so here's my strap, and what I've done is I've taken the long piece that I cut and I'm folding it in on itself. So I'm sort of like making a bias, but it's made out of knit so that I can fold it in half again. And I have pressed it and steamed it carefully because this is synthetic. So I've got this long piece ready. Before I can start on the strap, I need to trim away a little bit of seam allowance because how I'm doing this. I'm not going to be sewing on the facing. I'm going to be wrapping this edge kind of like a bias. So I'm going to trim away 1/4 inch along
starting from the front, going all the way around to the back, and then 1/4 of an inch starting here and going around the front. And that's going to make the straps come together appropriately and get rid of a little bit of that seam allowance that I don't need. So it looks like this. So here's one side of the front, and you can see the center front I have not done yet. I'm going to do this again. I'm going to cross this with my strap, and then I'm going to stitch that strap. It's going to come across, and then I'll use that whole strap piece to make the actual strap that comes around and attaches in the back. But I'm going to center it. I'll show you that piece in a minute. But we're going to go ahead and just stitch this around with the overlock. You could also use a twin needle. A double needle in your sewing machine works almost exactly like this cover stitch. The cover stitch looks like a twin needle from the front, and then it kind of zigs between in the back, and that's exactly what a twin needle does. Okay, so I have this strap area, or this area, covered with my binding, and now I'm come back to the front, and I've centered my binding on the center front, and I've sandwiched it on so that I can sew it. I'm going to just start at one end of the strap with it folded in half and start my cover stitch and sew all the way across the front around to the other end of the strap, and then I'll only have to measure and pin the strap down, stitch it down in the back. So we're ready to now cover stitch this little area, starting up at the end of the strap. So this is how it looks going in. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. And then that's how the strap looks coming out. That's the back side of it. Okay, so I've come across from the strap, and now I'm on to the front part, and we're just going to keep going around. When I'm done, we're just going to take the strap to the back, and I'm going to just use my sewing machine to stitch it down, and we're ready to go. All right, it's a little shady. We are having a major rainstorm, but I've got the slip on and pinned in the back so I can stitch it on. You can see I cut the smallest size because she is a tiny gal. So I hope that this is going to be small enough. And I took away some of the seam allowance. Because of how I did this, you don't get a perfect little V in the front, but it does lay nice and it finishes everything off. So every raw edge is covered and finished. So I'm going to go stitch those straps and put the dress over it. Okay, I just dropped the dress so we can see the slip on its own. And that's how it looks. Definitely looks more like an undergarment or pajama with the cover stitching, but it works well. And there it is in the back. I left the excess strap, so if she needs to adjust the strap, she can. And there's slip number 1, or slip dress. Just so you can see how it shadows through. So that's how the little under slip looks. When I have not ironed her outer dress because I'm going to throw it in an envelope and mail it in the morning, so it'll all have to be repressed anyway. That is how it looks, and it does brighten it up, especially in person. But you can kind of see the neckline through there. It'll hang better on her own body than on this dress form. Okay, slip number 1 is done. You can see it back there in the background on the dress form. I'm gonna go eat lunch, and then we'll come back and start the navy satin slip dress. Okay, we are on to the navy satin. It needs a real good press. Because I'm cutting on the bias, you can trace your pattern so that it is full, so you don't have to fold it in half, because sometimes it's a little harder to fold in half. However, I will show you how to do the fold. Okay, so I have taken my piece of fabric and I have folded it back on itself on the bias, which is pretty easy to do. You get a 90-degree angle right at your selvage edge. So it looks like that, and then I've laid it on the fold, and I will cut out one piece, and then I will move it and do the same thing to cut out the back. So this is the front, and then we'll cut out the back. And then I am going to go ahead and do straps and facings on this one, so I'll show you that. All right, so I just took a scrap, I've laid it so it is on grain again, and I'm going to cut my back facing out of that. Okay, here is the front facing. Again, I folded it on the straight of grain. So here's my fold line. This is my center front. And this is the corner where I had just cut out from my front on the fold on the bias. So I'm going to get this one cut out, and then we're going to move down and I'm going to cut the straps in this area, and then I'll fold on the bias again for the back. Okay, here's the strap just in a corner of this scrap. I just need 2 of these, and now we're ready to move on to the back. All right, last piece. Here is my back. I have it the center back on the fold that I did exactly like in the front, where I have made I've made this perfect 90-degree angle of my selvage, folded it back. Here's my back piece. It's ready to cut out. I had 3 yards of fabric, and this is using a little less than 2. So you can see what's left. I could easily get a little cami or something else on the bias out of this if I want to. There's some big scraps still left, so it's still a nice big usable piece of satin.
Okay, I have my beautiful navy satin all cut out, and we're going to sew this one on the sewing machine. I did the pink one entirely on the overlock except for tacking down the straps in the very back. Everything else was 100% done on the overlock. So that's one way you can make it. So for this one, we're going to treat it like we don't have an overlock, and we're going to do everything on the sewing machine. I am still deciding in my head how I want to finish off the edge of the facing. That's really the only place that I'm sort of iffy on, because the facing can leave a line when you have like a double folded hem. I don't want that to show. So that's the only thing in my head that I'm like iffy on. This pattern has 1/2 inch seam allowances. And I'm just going to start with my straps. So this little tiny strap is this, folded in half, right sides together. I'm going to make a 2 1/2 inch seam allowances, but it's kind of tight. So I'm going to probably do the strap closer to 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I have navy thread, just sewing this with a regular straight stitch. I have my stitch length at 3 on my and I'm using my straight stitch foot, which is also the 1/4 inch quilter's foot. It just makes life so easy for stuff like this. This satin sews up great. This is a polyester. So I'm just making a tube. Flip these inside out. I'm going to go ahead and sew the other one, and we'll just have the straps done. And then we're going to go on to side seams. And I have been vacillating on the side seam, and I'm pretty sure I'm just going to do a straight French seam. I just love the way they look. Okay, straps are sewn. Let's try this safety pin. The hole with the head. There we go. Satin can fray because it has a lot of floating threads. The way it's woven, that's what makes it satin. Makes it so pretty and shiny, those floating threads, but it also makes it fray a little easier than some fabrics. So we're going to be careful with this, not to pull it apart. We don't want to be rough with it, which is also why I went with just a tiny bit narrower seam allowance, because I knew it was going to get tight in this tube when we turned it. Right, do the wider seam allowance and trim away some of that pinket or something, so you don't have quite as wide a seam allowance before you turn it. The thing with leaving all that seam allowance in there is it kind of fills in the strap. It makes it a little more tubular, and it can be a little more attractive. So I wanted to leave it in there. It's, of course, that's personal opinion. That's my personal taste. Honestly, I prefer the satin to the knit, though the knit is very practical and it's very comfortable to wear. And it probably will give a little less static electricity. Satin can really carry some static with it. Okay, there we go. I'm trying not to be too rough. All right, I have one very pretty little strap ready to be pressed. So we're going to do that for both straps. And now we're ready to work on the dress itself, or the slip. So I have a back facing and a front facing here. Now I'm going to take my 2 dress pieces and I'm going to put them wrong sides together. Now we normally don't sew like this, but I'm going to be doing a French seam. So I'm going to put wrong side to wrong side, and I'm going to sew, this has 1/2 inch seam allowance, so I'm going to sew this at a scant 1/4, not quite a 1/4 of an inch. Because this is bias, you have a lot of stretch and movement in this outer seam. We want to be very careful. Some satins do not heal well when poked with pins. So this might be a project that you want to try using clips on. I don't mind pinning at all on satin, but I always make sure that the pin holes stay within the seam allowance and don't migrate into the actual garment, just in case you have a fabric that the pinholes don't heal when pressed. Sometimes they heal great, sometimes they don't. After I get these seams in, or at least this first seam, I'm going to give this a press because the fold lines from this, from being in storage, and I'm going to stitch all the way down. I have the satin side out, stitch all the way down at a scant quarter. So pretty small little straight stitch all the way down. If you've never done a French seam, it's a self-enclosed seam. I love them. They are a more elevated way of putting together a garment. The nicer the garment, the more things like flat felled seams, self-enclosed seams like a French or even a mock French, even bias bound, all of those are a more complicated, more time consuming, and more elevated way of sewing, and they elevate your own garment that you're making. So if it's a special thing, do a self-enclosed seam, or if you don't have a zigzag or a serger, self-enclosed seams work for that too. When I start to say though, so if you've never done a French seam, I have a video that's only on French seams. So you can follow along for making a basic French seam. But we're starting right sides together. What you want to do when because you're sew twice on your seam, you want both seams, the seam allowances added together from making that one seam will add up to the total seam allowance. So I have ½ seam allowance. So if I do a scant quarter and a full quarter, that takes up my ½ which is what I'm doing. You just want to make sure that you, the first one is the narrower one, which is the one that you do on the right sides. A scant means you're like, if you have your line on your sewing machine, you're just on the inside of it. So it's not taking the full bite of the amount. Now this will stretch, so you want to make sure you do not push, pull, or put tension on it so you get wavy seams. Having problems with when you're sewing your satin, if your needle pokes and you get runs in your satin, that means that your needle is dull and it is damaging your fabric. You want to always start satin with a good sharp new needle. You don't want it to be chewing away, eating up your fabric. All right, so I have my wrong side seam. I'm going to go over to this ironing board now. I'm going to press everything and I'm going to press this around to the right sides and put right sides together, and I'm going to sew down that seam again, this time deeper. We don't want any of this raw edge showing at all. So I'm going to sew just a little deeper than ½ inch so I don't have any of it show. Don't want to catch it in our seam at all. And then we will have a completely self-enclosed seam. It's going to look the same inside and outside along that seam edge, which is going to be gorgeous. So I'll meet you over at the ironing board.
All right, so this is the wrong side of the satin, and I have just pressed very carefully along that seam all the way up. And now I'm going to pull it on itself like this, and I'm going to press it again and make it as flat as possible and then stitch it up. And I went ahead and pressed the rest of it, so now you can see how lovely this satin looks. Gorgeous. It's going to be lovely on her. All right, I am doing the next round of stitching, and this is the wrong side. I have right sides together now, and you can see how there's inside there is that seam allowance. This is what the right side looks like. It is just lovely. All right, so here is the finished seam. I'm just telling you, it's hard to beat how lovely the satin looks. It's just luxurious. And this is the inside, completely finished off. Isn't that beautiful? Okay, let's do the next one.
Here we have, we have a stunning looking seam. Hardly looks like anything, but it's gorgeous, completely finished inside and out, which just elevates the garment. I love me a self-enclosed seam. So now that we've got one side done, I'm going to put wrong sides together, and I'm going to go ahead and do the other side exactly the same way. First side's the easiest. And if you want to do it more manufacturing way, you can do both of the first seams right sides out and then flip it around, press it, and then do both of the seams right sides together. Just do it whatever's easiest for you. I always recommend when you start with a new fabric, or if you've not sewn with satin a lot, so I take some scraps and I run them through the sewing machine or the serger, whatever I'm doing. I do a little tester almost every single time I sew. I do a little tester swatch in my scraps of check my needle, make sure my tensions are happy, which they usually are, especially if you have a more modern machine. You don't have to do as much adjustment as a rule, but I always test it. And that way, when you get to your actual garment, you don't have any sudden tragedies. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side, and I'll see you back here in just a minute. The other side is done. It just needs a press, and we're ready to move on. So now we're at the point where we can either hem it or work on the facing. We have options. I've already got my little straps made, and I've got them pressed. So I'm going to tack them where I want them to go, and I'm going to check the length. I'm going to start there. So we're doing right side to right side. And I'm putting the strap right in the center of the little peak. There are markings on the pattern where the strap goes. And this is the one area where, like, this is not skin tight. It just should sort of skim the body, but you want your strap to be the right length. So I'm going to make sure I don't twist this. And then I'm going to go over to the dress form and put it on the dress form real quick and just check the length. I'm going to pin these in and I'm going to tack them on. And then I think I'm going to go ahead and go to hem next. I'm going to get this strap tacked first. Be right back.
All right, I am at the hemline, and I have just pressed up 1/4 inch all the way around, and I'm just going to top stitch that down. Then I'm going to press up again another 1/2 inch and stitch that, and that will be my hemline all the way around. So I'm just doing a simple top stitched hem. Okay, so I'm going to show you how close to the edge I'm stitching. I'm stitching really close to the edge. Can you see that? And so on the wrong side, it looks like that. This is going to get folded up one more time. And it'll kind of look like that. It'll have 2 rows of stitching on the inside and 1 row of stitching on the outside for the hemline. All right, so this is how the hem currently looks. I'm going to fold this up 1/2 inch, about 1/2 inch, and stitch it one more time. I'm always stitching on the right side because that's the side that's going to show, and I want my, it looks best to have that side up when stitching.
I have the hem done. So I have just a simple little hem put in it, and I have tacked down my straps where they need to go, right side to right side. I've left excess strap in here, and I'm just going to trim it off a little bit inside the facing when I'm done, so that if she needs to adjust the strap, it'll be very easy to do. And I'm going to now start putting together my facing. And I could do a French seam. There's lots of things you could just straight stitch and zigzag, but what I'm going to do is a flat felled seam. Again, I'll put a video down below of how to do a flat felled seam. It's what you see on the sort of the more decorative stitch on jeans, but it's a very flat seam. And I'm just choosing to do that because it is flat and it will not add any bulk to the inside of the garment. There's video on how to do it. So I'm just going to stitch this up real quick, and then I'm going to hem the bottom of my facing like I did the hem line. I'm going to turn it up a tiny amount and then turn it up again and stitch it down. Then we'll be ready to install the facing. So all those things are getting ready to happen.
So here is the facing. I've got my flat felled seams and the hem put inside, so that's how it looks. So now we're ready to install it, and this slip will be done too.
I have a very pretty little facing all ready to go. I really am pleased with the flat felled seam on this. It makes it not bulky at all. and also nice and enclosed and pretty. So I have my straps on the right side, and I'm going to now pin my, or facing to my slip, and the strap will get caught in that, and everything will be finished. Matching everything up right sides together. I'm using clips this time. There's my facing getting clipped on, and I'm matching up my side seams, side seam to side seam, and because I did the flat felt, the side seam's not too bulky. We're just going to sew all the way around this at a 1/2 inch, and we're done. I'm going to come in and clip a little bit on the inside, like where the V is, needs to be clipped so that it opens up nicely, and maybe a little bit in this arm piece. We'll see. We'll see if there's any tight spots, and we'll do a little clipping there. And I made these, I did both slips in the same size, the exact same pattern, 2 different fabrics with slightly different sewing techniques. It's easy for you to compare the two and see the difference between sewing it in a knit or sewing it on the bias in a woven. So now my facing is all on there, and I'm just going to stitch it around. Now I did have problems, I will just say, as I was doing hemming, it's real easy, especially if you're trying to get close to that little turned up edge, to miss it. So I did have to go back a couple times and catch my hem again because I just let it slip. It is 3:30 or 3:20 in the afternoon, so I have been sewing since about 10 a.m. off and on. I had lunch in there and downloaded a couple video clips, etc., but sort of an all-day thing working on both slips. Now I have the facing on top and the slip on the bottom. The slip is the one that's biased. The facing is straight of grain. 1/2 inch seam allowance. I have my strap hanging down here.
Just so you can see how it looks, here's the straps hanging down. When I sew, I'm sewing across the strap only where it's caught. I'm being careful to keep it down out of the way, and we're just stitching around the circle. The other strap is all the way up here.
All right, gone all the way around. I'm going to make sure I didn't accidentally catch a corner of my strap and make it uneven. Nope, that's perfection on that one. Let's check this one and see if I think I got a little too far away on one little section. Let's see. Actually, it looks great. Okay, so I'm going to come in right here at this little peak in the center front, and I'm going to give it a clip. Okay, I'm going to clip up to but not through in that very center point. Up to but not through my stitching so that it opens up, and that will allow the V to come around. Now I'm going to do one more thing, and that is understitching. But understitching is where you press the seam allowance towards the facing, and then you top stitch on the facing right next to the seam where it's attached to the garment. And all that does is keep the facing from flipping over. Let me see if I need to do any other clipping anywhere else, and I may not, because the bias just makes it lay so pretty. Yeah, I don't need to. Okay, I'm going to press everything real good, and then I'm going to give you a little close-up of the understitching, and then I'll go show it to you over on the dress form.
Okay, I'm now doing the understitching. You can see my facing here, and I am stitching with my seam line right next to this part of my foot so that I get this very close stitching, and it is in the facing side, so it's not on the top. I'm not doing top stitching where you can on the outside. So this is how it looks getting stitched. I did not worry about coming up. I'm going to show you the top. This is where the strap comes out in the front, and you can see how I've stitched close, but I didn't try to get all the way up in here. I just stopped and back stitched. That's close enough. It'll keep it pressed around. So I am almost done with this part. I'm going to press it. I'll see you over at the dress form. Okay, here is the lovely satin slip. Okay, of the two, my personal favorite to sew was this one. It's because it's a more interesting sew with the self-enclosed seams, with everything being perfectly finished, with there being no zigzaggies or serged seams anywhere. A much more elegant garment, plus the satin just hangs lovely. It's just beautiful. It just looks so pretty. I'm going to stand on this so it doesn't flip over. There's the back. Look at how pretty that hangs. Now I left the excess strap stuck in there. It would just be a couple of stitches to remove in the back to slide that up and down for fitting if she needs to. It also would not be difficult to do a little fitting if we need to in the side seams. I'm going to send it to her as is. If she needs to take it in a little bit once she gets it, she can. This one, even though it is exactly the same pattern, seems much larger. And that's the nature of the spandex knit that I used. There's the back. You can see how well it hangs. Very nice. This was a very basic sewing project this week, and that's why I wanted to make two in two totally different methods to sort of give you some more ideas or options, especially if you're a new sewist. So I hope you enjoyed seeing one project done two completely different ways. The knit sewn entirely on the serger, other than tacking down the strap in the back, and the satin sewn entirely on the sewing machine with self-enclosed seams. Thanks for hanging out with me and sewing today, and I will see you next week for another fun sewing video.